Good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. I was thinking back to 1775. It was the turning point in the fight between the new American colonies in Great Britain. Remember hearing about the shot heard round the world? It was the start of the Revolutionary War. Well, with just some verbal shots and a large media megaphone, President Trump has sent a global sign that things are going to change or else. China, Mexico, and Canada are going to have to stop people from wandering into the U.S. aimlessly. They're also going to have to stop the flow of drugs that have been coming across our border for years now. People who are here illegally are going to be sent home. Government spending will shrink, taxes will be cut, and those who get in the way, looks like they'll be fired. There'll be no more DEI, at least not the government-sponsored versions. No more big tax breaks to try to subsidize electric cars that people don't really want. We're going to know if the food we eat is safe. And the U.S. is not going to sit back as the Chinese leadership tries to muscle past the U.S. military. Well, folks, we prayed for the truth to be told and for change that better reflected our biblical worldview. And it seems, at least for the time being, that we've gotten it, even more so than some of us imagined was possible in such a short time. With so many big issues on the table, we've asked the veteran reporter and author, David Drucker, to help us go through as much of this as we can tonight. Welcome back, David.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Well, in addition to what I've already mentioned, there's the matter of the rank insubordination at USAID. Spending has been cut off when it was discovered that $70 billion was being sent for global projects that don't often align with U.S. objectives worldwide. The projects are bizarre. Things like $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala, $32,000 for transgender comic books in Peru, another $2.5 million for electric cars in Vietnam, $1.5 million for DEI in Serbia. Yeah, that seems essential. And the list goes on, and there's no accountability. So there's a hold on any new spending, and the department may be moved under Secretary of State Marco Rubio. David, what tax-paying American would agree with that money being spent for humanitarian aid, and it's really going to those kind of projects? It just seems bizarre.
Well, look, there's a lot of money that the federal government spends, and without regular audits and regular accountability, some of this stuff can either get out of control or seem as though it's out of control. So I think the real question going forward here is, does the Trump administration want to put an end to what USAID is and does it have the legal means to do so? Or do they simply want to cull through these programs and eliminate the ones that they don't feel really enhances U.S. national security and our image around the world and help us counter Russia and China, but continue with the agency's original objective? There are concerns in Washington that what the Trump administration really wants to do is end the agency altogether, and they highlight programs like these, which clearly need to be looked at as a way to diminish the reputation of the agency and gain the political capital to shut it down. On the other hand, there are people that don't believe that the U.S. should be spending money on even good programs overseas. And I think what you're getting, at least from the administration's allies, is a push to eliminate the agency altogether, including some of the programs that you wouldn't put in that same category because they actually do help accomplish U.S. objectives.
Well, you mentioned the agency's original mission. Can you remind us what that was?
Well, it's really to further U.S. national security, to improve the image of the U.S. around the world, but really to help us counter U.S. adversaries, right? I mean, there are countries like Russia and China. Russia these days bogged down in Ukraine, so maybe not so much, but China for sure, that run around the world with money and dole it out as a means to acquire allies and tie countries to China and the Chinese economy, putting them in a different sphere of influence than that of the United States. And there is an argument to make that money spent overseas in foreign countries, which a lot of Americans don't always understand, particularly at times like these when inflation is high and the economy has been a little rough, and they wonder why we're doing this. Well, why we're doing this is to counter a rising China, keep the U.S. as the preeminent global power, and keep the U.S. out of a hot war that it might otherwise have to fight to do so, to keep the Chinese on its heels. That's what you want programs and agencies like this to do.
Okay. Well, the president's verbal shot was certainly heard in Beijing, Ottawa, and Mexico City. All three countries have agreed to some of what Trump wants to keep illegal drugs and criminals from walking straight into the U.S. without stopping. The new defense secretary has explained how part of the mission will work. Listen to what he said.
As we've said from the beginning, no one will wait on the Defense Department. We will be a key element of expulsions and mass deportation. So as we identify criminal illegals in our country, the military is leaning forward to help with moving them out to their home countries or someone else in the interim. Now, if they can't go somewhere right away, they can go to Guantanamo Bay.
Well, China pushed back with some tariffs of their own, but it appears to be more of a token to save some pride for their leader, who's already agreed to talk with President Trump. David, it looks like the shots may be working.
Well, we'll have to see over time what the impact is here. China has global ambitions, and I think before they ratchet up their response to Trump's tariffs, they may want to see exactly how serious the president is. The Canadian and China and Mexican deals are interesting because the president often makes the argument that we need these tariffs to improve American competitiveness, and here he was willing to stand down on the tariffs in order to get security guarantees. And of course, Canada and Mexico are presenting these deals domestically as wins for them as well. But clearly, these are the sorts of things that President Trump said he would do when he was campaigning. And so far, there isn't a negative reaction or negative impact to how he's gone about doing this. But we have to watch these things over time. They can have a long-term positive impact on the U.S. economy and U.S. national security. Some of our allies and our adversaries could also get impatient and get testy with how we deal with them, which would then require additional steps. So we'll just have to see how this unfolds.
Well, not many people understand the trade imbalance, so the president put this out. Listen to his comments.
Canada's been very tough on oil, on energy. They don't allow our farm products in, essentially. They don't allow a lot of things in, and we allow everything to come in. It's been a one-way street. We subsidize Canada by the tune of about $200 billion a year. And for what? What do we get out of it? We don't get anything out of it.
Do you think Trudeau will want to leave office being known for pushing back on President Trump? Or will he bend and do what seems fair for both countries?
Yeah, I don't think he'll want to leave office being known domestically inside Canada as somebody who bent the knee to Donald Trump. And so I think you have to look at this both ways. Second of all, different economists have different points of view about trade imbalances and how they actually operate. And, if the president has a problem with trade between Mexico and the United States or Canada and the United States, right now it's a product of the United States-Mexico trade deal that he negotiated when he renegotiated NAFTA during his first term as president. So in a sense, he's criticizing the deal that he made during his first term. The American economy is simply much bigger than Mexico's or Canada's. It's the biggest economy in the world. We are naturally going to purchase more products, both domestically and abroad, than other countries are going to purchase from us. So, obviously, there's a concern among Americans, voters, companies, industries, that they have access to foreign markets. But looking at this as a dollar for dollar comparison isn't necessarily the right way to look at it. And we've seen domestically lots of Trump allies very concerned that the tariffs are going to hit them and their states. For instance, Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, who cannot be accused of being a Trump opponent, was on social media just the other day pleading with President Trump to exclude something known as potash, which is very important for Iowa farmers that they import from Canada and I guess can't get anywhere else, or at least not reliably. So I think this really works both ways, and we're really not going to know how Trump's trade policies really work if and until he really pursues strong tariffs as opposed to using them as sticks to secure other deals. But some people would suggest that if he only uses them as sticks, he may not necessarily look at them as the economic boon that he talks about.
We need to take a short break before we turn to more on all the change taking place these days. You can jump in by sending us an email to comments@alanjacksonnow.com. We'll be right back. We're back now with the veteran writer and political reporter at the Dispatch, David Drucker. Bobby Kennedy's been approved for HHS Secretary after some pushback from the Democrats. I want to ask you about his plan to make America healthy again. Isn't that something everyone should be interested in? What are you hearing about the program itself?
Yeah, so Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was approved in committee, I believe. Floor vote could be this week or it could be next week. So it's still up in the air slightly, but with the Republican support he has, he's certainly looking like he's in a good position. Look, I don't know anybody that doesn't want to, quote unquote, make America healthy again. It's a good slogan. Different people may have different ideas about what healthy means. The concern about Bobby Kennedy all along has been his position on vaccines. I don't mean the COVID vaccine. I mean proven vaccines like the measles vaccine, the polio vaccine, and a whole host of others. Will he, try and block access to those vaccines? Will he try and block research and development, government funding and support for those things? And, he has assured people quietly, at the very least, or tried to assure concerned senators that that's not his interest, even though it's been a part of his life's work. But that's really, what this is all about. I haven't really seen anybody argue about his, desire to improve farm products and do other things that would improve, Americans' health, so-called. It's just a matter of, how people look at this.
More than a dozen Justice Department employees who were involved in prosecuting President Trump have been fired. Do you think the rest of the department is getting the message that lawfare will no longer be tolerated?
I don't know, because there are Democrats that look at the idea of firing people just because they worked on a certain case at the direction of superiors as lawfare itself. And so for some people, we've gone from one form of perhaps Justice Department politicization to another form of Justice Department politicization. And, the American people still remain pretty split on Donald Trump, although he's in the honeymoon phase and a lot of people are giving him a chance. And so I don't think we can look at these actions and just conclude that they're going to be interpreted one way or the other.
Well, let's move to the Pentagon. The president signed an executive order eliminating the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs from our military. He's also reinstated troops who were discharged for refusing COVID vaccines. Do you think that will help with the recruiting shortage?
I think that could, and I think, eliminating DEI programs in the government is something that's not going to get a lot of pushback. I mean, it had a lot of support, continues to have a lot of support, sort of on the far left. But I think for most people in the middle and even center left, some of these programs have seemed a little bit off base at the very least, if not misplaced. And being more flexible when it comes to things like the COVID vaccine and programs like the one you mentioned, I think this could help with recruitment. But it continues to be a major issue, and we're going to have to see how the administration deals with this going forward.
Well, David, you live and work around a lot of government workers. How's the return to work or take a buyout going over?
We don't know yet about how the return to work is going over. It just hasn't been long enough. I think I've heard mixed signals when it comes to the buyouts. There are a lot of government employees that have dedicated their life or spent their careers, depending on how you want to look at it, working for the government. There are certain government employee classifications that has to do with how much you get paid, what kind of pension you're due, that could discourage people from taking buyouts because it would impact how they might be employed with the government in the future should they ever go back in. It could have an impact on their pensions. So I'm not convinced that these buyouts, however generous they may be, are going to necessarily have the impact the Trump administration may want. But again, it's only been a couple of weeks, and so we don't really have enough information to make any sort of determination.
Well, David Drucker, thank you for joining us again. I am sure we'll have many more visits in the months ahead.
Thank you.
Coming up next, my thoughts on how to process the change, and later, your emails. Stay right where you are. new administration has ushered in changes at a rapid pace. Some of the changes include making federal employees show up to the office for work. That's a radical idea. Using our military to secure our border. Eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion programs from the military. Sounds like a good idea to me. Making our military combat ready for any situation. I thought that was the goal. Now the tariff confrontation with China, decisions and counter decisions. Some pundits are saying times will get tougher and the economy will get worse. Some are saying the new administration is leading us down a path of conflict. Well, I don't believe that conflict is always a bad thing. I believe peace and conflict can actually go together. I don't believe they're mutually exclusive. The most common definition of peace in the dictionary is a state of tranquility. But there's a second definition that I want to focus on for just a moment. Peace is defined as a state of security. We find this second definition used frequently in our New Testament by Jesus himself. In John 14:27, these are Jesus' words, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I don't give to you as the world gives. Don't let your hearts be troubled and don't be afraid." Well, when Jesus said that, he wasn't leading a life that was quiet or tranquil. In fact, most places Jesus went, there was turmoil. He was rejected frequently. He was ultimately tortured to death on a Roman cross. So for him to say, "You can have my peace," well, there's not a great deal of comfort in that if you think of peace merely as a state of tranquility. Jesus understood peace as a state of security. You never find him anxious. Well, I want to establish a new baseline for you and for me. I believe we can lead lives that are defined by a sense of security, no matter the turmoil that's taking place around us. We can have peace through his strength. I'll be back with your emails in just a moment. Stay with us. You know, on behalf of all of us who work on this program, I want to thank you for taking the time to send your emails. Your perspectives and thoughts, we all look forward to reading them. It helps us plan what our future will be. Carol emailed about the January 30th program. She said, "I'm so thankful that you put a program on about China. Little is said about the dangers they are to the world. There's an old saying that says, 'Give a man an inch and he'll take a mile.' Thank you for your program. I enjoy watching it." Well, Carolyn, I think that China has taken a lot more than a mile. Their agenda to really dominate the global community and see America diminished is not even thinly veiled. It's just brazenly been on display for a season. Perhaps President Trump will be able to curb that a bit if we have the will to support him. Lori from Georgia wrote, "I'm afraid of all the AI talk. Should we be using these apps?" Well, I think anytime new technology is introduced, it's easy just to be frightened. I don't think that's the best solution. I think we've got to understand it. I think where we can utilize it. But I think we have to become wise consumers, informed consumers. I have a friend, he's very bright. He immigrated to our nation from China. He earned doctorate degrees from MIT and Harvard. But he's warned me repeatedly that the greatest threat to our freedoms is AI. So I think we have to be engaged enough to see that it's used for our good and not for our harm. And finally, Amelia from Mableton, Georgia. "Thank you for all you do. I pray that God will bless you with good health so that you can have strength to preach, teach, and do your nightly TV show. I read your daily devotional first thing every morning. God bless you." Well, Amelia, thank you for taking the time to pray for me. And for those of you listening, if you will, I'd like to give you an assignment. There are people in your life who make a difference. Their voices make a difference. You depend on their relationships. Cultivate the habit of saying a short prayer for them every day. The things that Amelia said she was praying for me, that their health will remain strong, that they'll have clarity of thought, and that the impact of their lives will ripple on for many years to come. If we'll offer those kind of prayers, I believe God responds. It'll make all of our lives better. Just a reminder, if you miss our daily broadcast, you can find the program each evening. It's posted to YouTube. The address is on the screen. You can watch it at your convenience so you never have to miss an episode. Well, if you haven't yet, take a moment to send your emails to comments@alanjacksonnow.com. Again, your feedback and questions, they do a lot to shape our show. I'm Alan Jackson. Hope you have a wonderful evening.